Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the nitty-gritty of trust, boundaries, and reconciliation. You know, human relationships are just incredibly complex. But sometimes, if we look really closely at one deeply personal story, we can uncover these universal truths about how we connect, how we break apart, and most importantly, how we heal. And we're doing exactly that today. We're looking through the lens of Arabella and Robert's story. It's essentially a masterclass in what it actually takes to rebuild a family after a truly devastating fracture.
So let's kick things off by asking the ultimate question that really frames our whole analysis today. Can a shattered marriage ever truly be repaired? Think about it. When the foundational trust of a 10-year relationship gets completely broken in just a single night, is there any way to glue those pieces back together? Or is the damage literally fatal? Well, as we go through the evidence of Arabella's journey, we're going to see that the answer isn't just a simple yes or no. It's actually a highly conditional maybe, and it depends entirely on the actions that happen right after the trauma.
Let's start with part 1, the anatomy of betrayal.
We really have to start by examining the fracture itself, because understanding the specific nature of this betrayal is absolutely key to understanding the rigid boundaries that Arabella puts in place right after. Now, the stakes here are immense. We are looking at a solid decade of trust, a shared life, a 7-year-old daughter named Cecilia, the whole shebang. All of this incredible, compounded value is suddenly just put on the line on a totally random Friday night. Robert goes to a best friend's birthday party, while Arabella stays home sick. At this party, his ex-girlfriend is there, and Robert kisses her. Just like that, in a split second, 10 years of foundational trust is completely shattered.
Listen to how Robert initially frames his confession the very next morning. He says, "I kissed my ex-girlfriend last night. I was drunk, she came close, it just happened." Okay, really pay attention to the language he's using here. He's actively attempting to minimize his accountability by blaming external factors, right? The alcohol, the other woman coming close to him. He's basically painting himself as this passive observer to his own actions.
But Arabella immediately delivers this razor-sharp reality check. She completely, totally rejects his deflection. While he's over here claiming it just happened and I was confused, she points out the undeniable fact that infidelity is absolutely not an accident. It involves a sequence of choices. As she says, you had a choice, you kissed her back. She instantly strips away all those cheap excuses and zeroes right in on his agency.
Moving on to section 2, drawing a firm line.
You know, when a crisis hits, your immediate reaction completely sets the tone for the recovery. And Arabella? She doesn't waver. She doesn't collapse into this passive acceptance. Instead, she takes 3 distinct, empowered steps. First, she clearly expresses her pain and anger. She absolutely does not bottle it up. Second, she exercises her rights. Since she actually owned the house prior to the marriage, she immediately demands he pack his bags and leave. She literally physically removes the source of the betrayal from her safe space. And third, she ensures their 7-year-old daughter, Cecilia, who thankfully was at her grandparents' house, is completely shielded from the fallout of this adult conflict.
But as you might expect, almost immediately the external pressure begins. Her mother-in-law actually calls her and drops this line, "All men make mistakes. Think about your daughter. A child needs her father." Man, Arabella is facing intense societal pressure here. It's that completely outdated, deeply ingrained narrative that a woman should just quietly endure betrayal, swallow her pride, and maintain the status quo just for the sake of the family unit. It's a type of pressure specifically designed to make her feel guilty just for demanding basic respect.
Well, Arabella firmly rejects that pressure, and in doing so, she establishes the core thesis of our explainer. Love is not enough. Trust is more important. Arabella openly admits she still loves Robert, but she realizes that love without trust, that is just a recipe for continuous pain and anxiety. She flat out refuses to sleep next to a man she can't trust. She perfectly articulates that a healthy relationship absolutely requires both pillars to stand.
And she makes this really brilliant analytical distinction here that so many people struggle with during a separation. On one hand, Robert is a good father. He waits at the school gates, he drinks Cecilia her favorite books, he takes her out for ice cream. Arabella fully acknowledges this and never once tries to stop him from seeing his child. But on the other hand, she firmly holds the line, being a good father doesn't automatically excuse failing as a good husband. It's a tough pill to swallow, but you can absolutely succeed in one role while completely failing in the other.
Which brings us to section 3, the proof of change.
Because look, we all know words are easy and sustained behavior is incredibly hard. So we have to evaluate the timeline here. True forgiveness isn't an overnight decision, and it's for sure not a quick fix. Think about it. From day one through the first few weeks, Robert is just begging, flooding her with messages. She completely ignores them to protect her peace. But as the months roll on, something shifts. He starts showing up consistently for weekend visits, and crucially without pushing Arabella's boundaries. By the 1-year mark, we are seeing tangible, undeniable proof of behavioral change. Time really is the only fire that tests true change.
I want you to look closely at this because this is the true anatomy of a real apology. An apology isn't just saying, "I'm sorry," and buying a bouquet of flowers. It is fundamentally changing the behaviors that caused the pain in the first place. Robert entirely stopped the drinking that led to the incident. He completely stopped lying. He consistently showed up for Cecilia without fail. And honestly, perhaps most importantly, he respected Arabella's need for space. He didn't try to force his way back in. He simply did the heavy lifting, put in the work, and waited.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 4, Choosing Forgiveness.
Finally, after a full year of living apart and closely observing Robert's consistent transformation, he asks if they can be a family again. And Arabella agrees, but she makes her reasoning incredibly clear. Not because I'm weak, I'm strong now. I choose you again because I believe in second chances. Guys, this is just incredibly powerful. It fundamentally redefines forgiveness. It's no longer this passive submission or a desperate return to the status quo out of some fear of being alone. No, it is a deliberate, highly empowered act of strength. She realizes she doesn't need him, rather she's actively choosing him again based on the solid new evidence he has provided.
So to bring it all together for this explainer, Arabella's story really gives us this perfect 4-step blueprint for what genuine, earned reconciliation actually looks like in the real world. First, you absolutely must establish absolute truth and accountability. Literally, no excuses allowed. Second, the person who committed the betrayal has to prove changed behavior over a significant chunk of time. Third, physical and emotional boundaries must be strictly respected. And fourth, the eventual return has to be an empowered choice to rebuild, definitely not just a regression to the past.
Arabella notes that they are actually happy now. Sure, they aren't a perfect family anymore. That illusion was totally shattered on that Friday night. But what they have now is a real family built on truth, love, and a second chance. It just goes to show us that while a relationship might always carry the scars of a fracture, it can become solid, authentic, and perhaps even stronger, but only if that necessary, grueling work is actually put in by both sides.
I want to leave you all with one final thought to apply to your own life and your own relationships. If trust is broken, what would it actually take for you to offer a second chance? Would you have the strength to demand the boundaries Arabella did? Would you absolutely require the sustained proof of change that Robert eventually provided? Take a moment and really think about where your own boundaries lie, because knowing your limits, that is always the very first step to protecting your peace. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.